Zach Harrison. What can you say? That guy's a phenomenal talent, 5-star, chose Ohio State over Penn State, Tony.
Well, just going back to what Al Washington said about him when we talked to Washington, the linebackers coach at Ohio State, we talked to him, I don't know, a few weeks ago. He's like, well, let me tell you about Zach Harrison. I saw him. He's, 6'6", 260, and he was probably 6'6", 240 when Al Washington saw him. He's like, I saw him run a 10-700 meters in tennis shoes in the rain. And pretty much that's all you need to know about Zach Harrison. And now as he continues to learn to bend and learn to use his hands, what Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach, calls, putting tools in the toolbox. And it's the feet pointed the right way. It's the shoulder dipped certain way. It's getting the hands on first. It's learning all of these little nuances, because you can be the greatest athlete in the world, but you're not a defensive end. He's turning this in every step of the way. When the crazy thing about Zach Harrison is he was always a 5-star guy, but he was also talked about being, really raw, and he's just a crazy athlete. He's amazing, and he's fast, and he's this and he's that, but he's raw. But every step of the way at Ohio State, he has been advanced, and he's been more than just an athlete, and he hit winter workouts, and he learned from that. And he played last year as a true freshman, didn't look raw. He looked like a very talented true freshman. He looked like what Chase Young has looked like and what other guys have looked like at that age. And so now missing the spring for all of these guys it's bad, and it's too bad, because this is where they continue to learn their craft, and this is where he can become more. And you wonder, as we go on this year, next year, what kind of what will we see as the fallout from not getting this spring? Will there be a delay in some of the guys as they hit their peak? Will they be doing it as a senior rather than a junior? But Zach Harrison, he's what you want in a defensive end. And as Larry Johnson has told me before, he's like, I love to mold clay. I like big blocks of clay. And that's what Zach Harrison is. He's a big block of clay that runs a 10-7, was clocked, I think, in the 4.4s at a Nike combine. He's, like Javon Curse, there was a legend about how he had the best 10-yard split tied with Deion Sanders at the NFL combine or whatever. And you get these crazy athletes, and that's what Zach Harrison is. Sometimes you get these crazy legitimate freaks and they're defensive ends, and that's what he is.
Who's the fastest guy in the roster?
Well, that's a good question.
It was Paris Campbell, right?
It
was.
He would tell you that. He would get upset if you told him that he wasn't. But probably in 2018? Yeah.
Maybe Olave now.
I think Olave now. That's probably who most people would say. And I don't know.
Were any of those 4 wide receivers who are freshmen known as a faster guy than the others?
Steve, Jamison Williams would also tell you he is the fastest.
Okay.
Sophomore receiver out of St. Louis. So I think maybe those two. I don't think any of the freshmen necessarily. They're all fast enough.
I think Banks and Wade in the secondary have great football speed, but I don't know straight line if you'd say that they have 4.38 speed. I don't know.
Master Teague is the fastest running back last year, according to Tony Alford, the fastest and the biggest. So in a straight line, Yeah.
I was going to mention him because I tried to portray him as more of a Raymond Harris in between the tackles guy, because that's really how they used him last year, and he'd get 4 or 5 yards a clip. And somebody said, no, you got it all wrong. He could be the speed guy if they put him in the right place with the ball maybe on the edge, or I don't know.
I'm with you, Steve. It didn't look like it.
No, he didn't show football speed. That's the thing. And, it's interesting. This even goes back to John Cooper. I can remember him. Cooper, maybe Tressel, Meyer always talked about hitting home runs. Cooper talked about it a little bit, how, a guy maybe as a sophomore or a junior was just starting to scratch the surface of his potential. But like Eddie George, maybe 1,400 yards as a junior, and they still wanted to see more. They still thought there might be more, and then they got it. You know, his last year, he became the home run hitter. He was having 60 and 70-yard touchdown runs and, you know, running over people as well. But to me, that's what they always are trying to build these guys to, is that next progression. And I definitely think Teague has got that potential to go from being the Raymont 4 or 5 yards in a cloud of field turf pebbles to, you know, being a guy that can get you 20, 30 yards and then break that big one to change the game. So that's what they're always striving for.
Well, and Teague, when he was trying to get his offers from Ohio State and Alabama, I believe, camped at both places and would run hand time 4.3s. And I don't know that Alabama offered him. Obviously Ohio State did, and he took that. But getting him to that straight line on the football field is sometimes the issue, and him finding that hole. But you know, I don't know the last Ohio State backup running back to rush for 800 yards and then not do something significant after that as well.
Yeah, I'm working on a thing right now, looking at only 10 times in OSU history that I've found have they had a situation where they've had 3 guys with 500 yards in a season, and 5 of those have actually happened in the last 10 or 15 years with the quarterback mixed in with the other 2. And usually it's been 2 running backs and a quarterback, but I'm hoping to put that together in the week ahead, because I do foresee a committee with Sermon, Teague, Chambers, Crowley. Hopefully they can redshirt Mayan Williams and see how he comes through it. But yeah, I'm of a mind that it's going to be spread around more than it's going to be one directed guy.
It brings into light the under recruitment of Chris Olave. As soon as you guys mentioned that he's maybe one of the top 5 fastest guys on the team, that he's with the kind of skill set that he has. In addition to that, you just figure, okay, he's under the radar because he can't run elite at an elite level, but he's got all these skills and he turned out to be a gamer. But for him to fly under the radar for that long is...
Well, I believe he missed his junior season. I don't know if it was a transfer issue, but then, you know, he blows up as a senior and Ohio State was in on him early. And so I think that stuck with him. But yeah, the junior season is like so huge for recruits, because that's when schools and everything start noticing them. And that's, because by the time a player is a senior, sometimes there's no more room for them in a lot of places, because they have the scholarship slots all filled. And as Urban Meyer would lament all the time, recruiting has moved so fast now, and you can't see guys as seniors develop. You may only have a spot for a couple of them, and he would try to hold back one spot for an Ohio senior just to see, just in case somebody developed and came on late, that he could then offer them. And now, as Steve mentioned, you know, if there's no Ohio football or there's no high school football, then, you know, how do you? There's none of that development. Ryan Day is trying to get spring football in Ohio to help the Ohio development. But yeah, I think Chris Olave, I believe he just missed his junior year, and Ohio State was in on him early. I believe they were recruiting a quarterback at that time, and that's how they mixed together and found him.
Yeah, Olave, it was interesting. Pat Murphy from our staff, and formerly of your staff, Tony, the great Pat Murphy, was writing about the great individual games that Buckeyes had, and he left out Olave against Indiana. I was down there taking pictures with your friend Harker from your staff, and he and I are down there, and we're about getting run over by Chris Olave. He blocked a punt, and then he came back 2 minutes later and got behind the Indiana defense for a touchdown, and showed great football speed on both those plays, obviously. So I don't know how he translates on that 40 time, but he's good enough to win you football games off his speed and athletic ability right there. Those 2 plays almost back to back, really, in that game for the Buckeyes. So, guys, I got to run and get my hair cut. So I will.
All right, Steve, we appreciate it.
Next time.
See you, Steve.
Good to see you as always. You'll be looking sharp next week for sure.
Well, I'll be here. We don't know how I'll be looking.
And Olave got a punt against Michigan, didn't he?
Yep, and that's
Columbus.
That's using that speed to get around the edge, you get through there, get through the middle, and get there before that ball gets off. And I mean, how many times did we see him last year where he's got 5-6 yards room past the corner on a deep route? And yeah, he's fast. Jamison Williams though is the guy when he's running. He had you remember the 57-yard touchdown he had last year on a catch and run early on the season. He looks like Ted Ginn once he gets in that full sprint. I'm not saying he's Ted Ginn or as fast as Ted Ginn, but there's some similarities there just in that stride. And I know he's another guy that he's a forgotten guy, but he and Chris Olave will be the Z's this year for Ohio State, along with maybe one of the freshmen. But don't forget about Jamison Williams.
Now, of course, speed is speed, and you can tell who the fast guys are out there and who are they're all fast at those positions, but who the elite guys are. But when you mention Ginn, there are certain guys that just the way they run, they just either look faster or slower, and they're really, really fast, but they just maybe have an awkward. But Ginn just looked great too. He just, oh my goodness, that guy used to just, for the first several games I watched him, I just couldn't believe it. And it must have been the defenders couldn't believe it as well, the angles that they would take, and still he would beat the angles. It took players a long time to get used to his speed in the Big Ten. Yeah,
I don't know that it doesn't matter once you get used to it either. But I got to see him in the Big 33 and Ohio North-South game and these Ohio All-Star games where he was clearly the best player, the best corner, the best receiver. But yeah, he's one of those guys that you hold your breath, and it's like, it's when he's running, it's like you can hear music. It's like a symphony going on. And like him, and I think maybe Devin Hester, maybe the two fastest college football players with completely different running styles. Like Devin Hester, his legs are moving so fast, it's like Sonic the Hedgehog, where it's he's churning out so many strides. And Ted Ginn, there's never been anything like him, I don't think.
I don't point these two guys out because they're both Buckeyes, but it works with the show. Ginn and Joey Galloway. Now, unlike, let's say, the baseball pitcher who relies on the fastball, then he turns 30, 35 years old, and then he picks up a pitch or two. Those guys just stayed fast, like beyond their age. They were
Darryl Green.
Ginn still playing. Joey Galloway was in the league forever and still could burn and take the top off a defense.
I think Joey Galloway is probably like 43 or 44, and he might be one of those guys that can run his age. Like 43 will run a 4.3, 44 run a 4.4, something like that. And he was like, I remember the stories about him benching 400 pounds, running 4.19 is, I believe, the number that was attached to him, not officially by the NFL, but he was one of those guys like him and Dion, where sub 4.2 is, the legends that you grow up hearing. And he's another forgotten guy who played. It's too bad he played when he did. If he would be playing in today's college football, then I saw Rondale Moore's name pop up. You get Joey Galloway on an offense where he touches the ball 120 times and he's walking away with a Heisman.
As soon as you say that, I'm reminded of a game against Illinois and Champaign in '91 in which Ohio State did not throw the ball in the first half. And of course, Joey Galloway was on the field the entire first half. Just couldn't throw the ball and didn't score any points. It wasn't like they were running for 250 yards and they had 3 touchdowns at halftime. They didn't have any points. They were down 7-0 at the half and still couldn't find, with Jeff Graham, who was a very good wide receiver with the Bears and other teams, caught like 90 balls a couple times. Galloway, I'm sure maybe Brian Stabline, who played in the NFL for 3 or 4 years, so they had weapons, but that was the way the game was played to a certain extent at that point.
And even a couple of years later, you had Galloway and Glenn on the same 93 team, 94-ish, somewhere in there. And but yeah, the quarterback play wasn't there yet, and the offensive desire wasn't quite there yet. Although they still had some of their best passing games, or best passing seasons were 95 and 98, with Bobby Hoying throwing for over 3,000 yards and Joe Germain throwing for over 3,000 yards. And since then, now you've had J.T. Barrett did it, I believe, in 2017, and Dwayne Haskins went for over 46 or something in 2018, and then Justin Fields 3,200 and some last year. So they're finally catching up with that late 90s passing offense here at Ohio State, right?
That brings to mind, I was flipping by one of these Big Ten network specials, whether it was the Elite Series or the Journey or whatever it was, but they were looking back at the 95 Northwestern team that came out of nowhere to go to the Rose Bowl. And of course, Ohio State would have won the Big Ten championship had they beat Michigan with that tremendously talented offense, lost to Michigan. About 3 to 4 years later, I got a chance to interview Brian Musso, who was kind of the jack of all trades back for Northwestern, kind of a poor man's Christian McCaffrey. And he flat out told me, so Northwestern, as you well know, Tony, I'm talking to everybody else to a certain extent, Northwestern and Ohio State were tied going into the final game of the season with no losses in conference play. Northwestern lost some kind of odd out-of-conference game, as they typically do, even back then, to like Miami of Ohio or somebody. So Ohio State would have, with the undefeated record, gone to the Rose Bowl and been playing for a national championship. No, the two teams did not play. Brian Musso told me, we would see Ohio State on tape, every other week preparing for our opponents. We did not want to see that. He was flat out just said we didn't want to see them.
Well, and then the next year they had a really good year as well, and both years coincide with no Ohio State on the schedule, and but still, it was a great story. Everybody was rooting for Northwestern back then, but I don't think it would have gone well for the Wildcats against either of those teams.
And it would have gone much better in terms of an entertaining Rose Bowl because USC pretty much clocked Northwestern.
Yeah,
with Keyshawn Johnson.
Well, I think I've told this story before. I was at that Michigan game in '95 as a student. It was a done deal. Ohio State was going to beat them. Ohio State won in '94, so a new leaf had been turned over. And then you walking out of the stadium, and the cops, on the crosswalks are making fun of Buckeye fans. Saying we got roses here, roses for cheap. You want some roses? And so it was not a great scene as the police mocked Buckeye fans, and so did the Michigan fans. So yeah, but then Northwestern got to go and got their butts handed to them.
And they've been a decent program since. So that was kind of a turning point for a Northwestern program that was just the laughing stock of the nation. Think Kansas. Now, people, if you're not familiar with the Northwestern's plight from
without the book learning.